so that this is like worth it the first time. All right, let's call to order the Parks, Recreation, and Greenways Board meeting on this Tuesday, November 5th, 2024 at 9:02 a.m. Welcome one and all on this election day that we've all been waiting for to be over. Except maybe Austin over here, who's really psyched for election day. Yeah, he's excited about it. All right, so we have a quorum of the board. Unfortunately, John, our council liaison, is unable to join us today, so at the appropriate point in the agenda, I will be filling in for him. All right, so first, I have so many notes here. First, we will adopt the agenda. I'm sorry, I was trying to decide if I'm going to make the motion. I move to adopt the agenda as presented. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Awesome. All in favor?
Aye.
No objections. Motion passes. Moving on to the next item is after careful perusal, I make a motion to adopt the previous minutes as presented. Do I hear a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Make sure you have your microphones on when you're voting.
I know. I'm too busy laughing.
And no objections, motion passes. All right, so moving on to, I did note we have a quorum. We do not have any remote participation, so for the record.
Thank you, sorry.
No remotes, and no public, no comment. All right, so moving on quickly to our Parks and Recreation updates. Tyler, you're up.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Last Friday, the 25th, we had our trick-or-treat. Huge turnout. As always, we had 14 vendors there set up, businesses giving out candy, bounce houses. We had, Davey and the guys really packed the park. I mean, it was full of cars. There was a couple hundred at least. So that was a big turnout, great success.
Did that create traffic issues?
Did not. The officers of the road did a really good job of keeping the flow up and going. It's probably the best it's been, in my opinion, of there not being a huge line trying to turn left into the park.
Well, that was always sort of the pain of our success, right? Was want to have a big event, but how do we keep it from creating an absolute nightmare
Having
on the road?
a line all the way back to Publix.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess between packing the cars in and the officers having a handle on it, that went more smoothly this year.
We had some really good officers at the road. They were pretty no nonsense out there. They were getting after it.
Okay.
So that was a good one. Thanks to everybody that helped out and helped with the prep. So next thing coming up, friendship tree. We've had to push it back till we're going to start on Monday. Now it's supposed to start this week, but we're having a bit of a delay getting the names from the Christmas Bureau from Union County.
Oh, really?
So we're going to get them this week, hopefully by the end of the week, and that way we can have the tags and everything ready to hit it hard Monday. So be on the 11th, yes. So everybody be on the lookout for that. If anything were to change, you just have to check our social media to anybody listening to this. And then tree lighting, December 7th. That'll be from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the barn at Eford Park. We'll have a lot going on there. Santa Claus is going to be there. The high school choir, high school band's going to perform. We'll have cookies. We got hot chocolate and coffee. All types of good stuff. We'll have a dog kissing booth. It's really cute.
What is that?
It's like
exactly what you think.
Yeah. This lady has it's a kissing booth, and she brings these 2 German Shepherds with her, and they pose for pictures. You hop in there, and they'll lick your face. It's real.
On purpose.
Yeah, they mean it.
And we have better lighting for them this year. They were really awesome last year, but as it got dark.
We have adjusted the lighting on the back, underneath the back
So there's
canopy.
a place where they could still get some.
Yeah, last year it was kind of like off-colored light, and it was kind of dim back there, but we have,
Okay.
since replaced those. So,
Cool.
big thanks to Public Works. And then January 24th, right now, is the date we've locked in for our next stargazing event. So we have Dr. Abba's going to be out there. This one's going to be great. We'll do it at, like 6 o'clock. There won't be any mosquitoes. It's going to be great.
Yeah, that's gonna be
It's gonna,
fantastic, yeah.
instead of 9 o'clock and getting eaten
And
alive.
that's a Friday?
That's a Friday, and we'll reserve the 25th Saturday in case of cloudy, bad weather or something.
Okay.
But that's about as far out as we're looking right now. So that's for events.
All right.
Any questions?
Is there anything that we would do differently for trick or treat next year? Do you want more vendors, or just kind of we've hit the sweet spot and status quo?
Always taking more vendors. The only change that I'm debating in my mind about is doing away with the movie at the end, because we had a whopping 25, 30 people there, when we could maybe direct more funds to getting a few more light towers and doing the trick or treat after dark as well. Just have a longer just trick or treat and then call it instead of.
I can imagine a bunch of kids eating a lot of candy and going to watch a movie. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no.
They're sick, or their parents are.
And it's like it's like an odd sunset time. Like it was like the movie started at 7:30, which isn't late, but if you're 5, 6, 7 years old, it's like, all right, it's 7:30. We got to get you back to the house, and we got to start getting ready, and so it's kind of a tweener there. But that's just that's my only thought right now.
Do we charge for these vendors, or?
Yes, so it's the normal fee of $25 to come, and they were able to conduct business. I mean, if there was a realty company and somebody wanted to make a deal, they could make a deal. But yeah, everybody there was great. A lot of people dressed up, like a lot of the vendors, and really did up their booths and stuff. So it looked pretty good. We had the Charlotte Fun Bus, who is a.
The fun bus, yes. How did that go? I know we were talking about
It killed. It was cool. A lot. I mean, they had a constant stream of people, and they were really nice, and they really enjoyed being there because I think I don't know how many birthday parties they probably booked from that, but it was good.
Awesome. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No.
Is that the only time of year that we do like a vendor kind of event? Because I mean, it sounds like if it's that popular, is there anything in the spring that we do to bring that?
So on Marvin Day in April, this year specifically is almost a little different than it has been in the past. It'll be more of a vendor type like this, where if somebody has a sweet shop or something, they'll be able to pay the fee, set up, and conduct business as usual, like a market style. Other than that, yeah, this is almost the only event where we just take a bunch of vendors.
It sounds like it was had a lot of energy because of that. I just wondered, is there some other, but I mean, that's because they're also giving out candy, right? So
Right,
Well,
right.
I'm thinking
So
maybe.
what can you attract people
so
in,
we
like-
didn't have a huge turnout for Easter, and that's another
Candy
holiday.
Oh, we didn't even do the Easter this past year. It got rained out both
Oh, that's
days.
right, it rained out. Yeah.
Yeah, so we didn't have a good turnout.
That
But
would be the opposite of
Zero.
turnout. Yes.
And then is the fee kind of to help offset the cost of, I guess, the service? Well, I guess it's pretty low
It's-
cost because of the.
That's really
yeah, it's a low cost, and it's just basically a fee to conduct business. Like we have like pro passes at the park for photography, where you have to pay a fee if you're going to like do something physical. Like if you're going to make money, it's a little bit of a
Kind of a rental fee, space rental fee.
yeah.
And that
Yeah.
goes towards the parks, I mean, the funds.
Yes,
That's
it's
what I'm wondering, is it a good fundraiser-ish kind of thing? Not fundraiser, but,
It does go back into our budgets.
yeah, I guess. that's what I'm saying,
Yeah,
so-
yeah, absolutely. No, Tyler just pockets it all.
Yeah, mine.
Yeah, I just
Just more hot dogs.
like more candy.
Yeah, no, it goes back into the budgets. Oh, that's right. Yeah, we did.
oh
have
the
vendors at
5K we had a bunch of vendors at the health fair at the 5K. So that one was about the same deal, and a lot of those people. It was the same price. They were able to conduct business. It was the same deal.
Okay. So I think it was also, I guess that's good because, I mean, the Halloween event attracted children, but maybe you have some older adults who might be interested in the vendors but wouldn't be at the Halloween event. So maybe Marvin Day or these other events,
Yep.
they could be.
The Marvin Day Committee has been trying to figure out a vendor kind of thing. The very first Marvin Day was in too many different places, and so people didn't know where to be. The second one, we partnered with Firethorn, and that ended up being a disaster because they didn't market it. So then, we're still trying to navigate how to set that up, because then in the park, it was only available to sponsors to be like a vendor, but a lot of them aren't vending anything, so you don't really have that feel of a market.
Yeah.
So this year, we're in Marvin Day Planning Committee, we've been working on how that's going to pan out.
And Christmas
So-
doesn't have a vendor market, does it? Does it have like a Christmas market?
No,
Like,
Chris-
you
No,
do like a-
no, that's
No.
just come listen to music
Right,
and
right, right, but could
drink
that
It's a
be
pretty-
something in the future? I mean, just
It's a
as
pretty
far as-
tight, it's a tight time window, and it's a pretty tight little event. We almost keep the tree lighting our most local event. Like, it gets mainly pushed out here in Marvin. And last year was a lot of residents, and it was basically all locals, which having the high school brings in a great deal of like the local crowd. But that one's pretty, you'll see that it is boom, boom, and it's over. And
although a Christmas market might not be a
Christmas
bad thing,
market.
maybe when we get the park or
yes,
something.
yes.
Cool. All right, so, anybody else have any other questions about events? Moving on to trails and greenways, what have we got?
I think Hunter wanted to bring up the Tullamore.
Yeah, I got you. For those that aren't aware, literally the last 4 or 5 years, the village has been working on obtaining an easement to connect the Amber Meadow and Tullamore greenways through the Towns of Audrey townhome development that's off of Ray Road. The Towns of Audrey is in unincorporated Union County. However, the village was able to work with their HOA and obtain an easement through the back of their common open space to connect the trails. So we are proceeding with getting a wetland delineation, as well as a few other minor information from our consultant done. Potential grave site, just trying to check our boxes, make sure all of that is checked off. But we do have, the council did approve the quote for the construction of the trail. Once all those studies come back and check off, then our consultant would then construct the trail, probably starting anywhere in later this month or early next year to have it completed. But other than that, that's the only trail update, unless you guys have any questions on any specific projects. Oh, Marvin Loop. Thursday, here at Village Hall from 5 to 7, the village will host a public information meeting for the Marvin Loop, or the portion of Marvin Loop that has been funded through DOT and the Federal Highway Mission, FWHA. We are the open house, so that basically is the funding, for those that don't know, is from, sorry, it's early. Taking it from here at the preserve, bringing that up by Village Hall, down Newtown Road, down Marvin Road, to stop at Saddle. Really, actually, the now proposed route is not even to go, once it gets to Innisbrook, it's actually to come across Newtown and connect there. I think it's Woodcliff. There's already an existing portion on the Woodcliff side. But just for your guys' information, we'll have a public information meeting for anybody to come and learn about the project, provide comments here at Village Hall from 5 to 7 on this Thursday. So wanted to make sure you guys were aware, either once again to come and participate or just to let people know.
Is there issues with the easements on any of those properties, or are those all been?
So most of that proposed route is either in the right-of-way, which means we just have to work with DOT for an encroachment agreement, or easements have been previously obtained through subdivision approval. I do know, for example, we do have an easement on the Innisbrook common open space at the front of their neighborhood. The preserve portion's already been built. I think, if I recall, based off the preserve, the only one is the corner property at Newtown and Marvin that we would need an easement from. And maybe the churches, but other than that, most of it is within the right-of-way, so it's just an encroachment agreement with NCDOT.
So if it, like a Saddle Road ends, so there's no Marvin Creek from Saddle, is that gonna be part of it?
Saddle Avenue itself is a private
Right.
road, so we can't designate
Right.
that one as a trail.
So it just stops at, so they're gonna stop at Saddle and not continue past like the ups, towards
Correct. So the original route was having it stop at Saddle. After some initial feedback from, which there's still an unfunded portion, which takes it from Saddle to Wheatfield to connect the whole, it's like 3.2 or 3.7 miles of the Marvin Loop. That unfunded portion, I know Christina and I have discussed looking at going for grant opportunities and stuff to hopefully try getting that funded so we can complete the loop within the next 3 to 5 years. But for this project, it does stop at Saddle. However, when I say it stops at Saddle, based off of feedback received from the property owners, the kind of directly affected property owners, it makes more sense actually to cross the road to the Woodcliff section. And that's the long-term really thought too, is because then when we do that final unfunded portion, you're on the higher side of the road, on the Firethorn side. You're only dealing within either Firethorn compared to, I think there's 7 properties between Saddle and Joe Carr. And just based off of topo and grade, it makes more sense to be on that side of the road. So that's kind of the proposed routing. So it'll be on the interior side, I guess,
The Firethorn side? Or
it'll be on the Preserve and Innisbrook side until, once you pass Innisbrook, that's where it will cross, and then it will be on the Firethorn side.
So then it will require a crossing on Marvin
Correct.
Road,
It's like
but
one of the most dangerous roads.
It is that, an RFB, which is like the rapid flashing beacon, and striped roads, is part of the current design.
also we have that grant for the Safe Streets for All, and so that is one
Yeah.
thing that grant can help cover is a safety plan
Okay.
for crossing
Correct.
Marvin Road.
How do you get back? I mean, so once you
Yes.
cross, once you
Make the
cross
speed bump
that
a bridge.
side, how do you have to cross back over at some point to?
Get back to the
Yeah,
Joe
something
Kerr,
like
because
that.
we have.
Yes, in the future, yes. For the time being, pretty much, if you're walking the trail until we have this unfunded portion, we'd probably put signage that, just have like where if you're walking at Innisbrook, you don't cross unless you live over there, or that's the way you're going anyway, meaning to the Woodcliff side or Firethorn side. But very preliminary, if we get the final phase funded, it would continue down Marvin Road to Joe Carr. At Joe Carr, we are also looking at doing intersection improvements. That's also kind of a couple years out, but right now between a signal and an interchange or a roundabout, very preliminary. We're still in engineering or preliminary engineering, not even preliminary. Conceptual design is part of the critical intersection grant that the county got. We're having those 2 intersections, the design and cost analysis done for Joe Carr and Marvin. But once it gets there, you're gonna cross. I don't know which side of the road it's gonna be on Joe Carr. The existing path is on the interior. Once again, kind of what I call in the interior if you're just kind of making a normal loop around. However, we do have an easement on the Sage at Marvin property. We have an easement on the Elysian Field property. So that's where we're gonna have to kind of, once again, it's very conceptual until that gets funded and kind of discuss it further with an engineer. I don't have a full say on where it's going to be located, especially on Joe Carr. So.
Seems like a lot of back and forth over a road that I don't feel safe today crossing, but I certainly can't imagine. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, the goal is to only, that one cross is beneficial because, like in this current funded one, is just because when you look at the grade, like if you're out there on the road, the Firethorn side sits higher than the other side. And then you're also then dealing with individual property owners compared to the country club or the HOA at that point. But from a safety aspect, like the trail wants to naturally be higher. And since we already have that portion on Woodcliff constructed, it makes more sense. So you will have that one cross. Once again, that's feedback that, we're looking for in this process. The reason why we didn't want to have it end at Saddle is because, one, it would require trees to be removed on that corner properties, individual lot on top of, at this time, you would have a dead-end trail that would end at Saddle. And so, it's just trying to be proactive on that of some of the concerns we've already heard from the individual residents.
Yeah, it's obviously not ideal to cross Marvin Road, but something to keep in mind when we get to the master plan concept.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure because, is it even worth building unless it's really for, because then it's going to kind of dead end. So then I'm like, well, we could cross across the road just to walk
So
a few feet.
it is probably worth it because people from Firethorn
yes,
are already crossing.
Correct.
Yep.
But just like past it, I mean, like, just picturing it, you'd be building a path that goes to like dead ends at you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
kinda
yeah.
Like when you walk.
So-
I can see going to Firethorn, but just past it just seems like you're walking to nowhere.
Yeah, so, I mean, what is being done is the compromise to sort of at least complete some version of a loop. I agree with you. It would be much better if we just had a continuous thing around the interior, and hopefully we can continue to work towards that. But it would still be beneficial, because like people already come out of Firethorn, come down and cross at Saddle. So if we can formally address that in a way that helps make them
I think
safer.
the safety part would be excellent too.
Yeah, so I mean, the fact that it's less than ideal for a particular trail, but if it addresses something that's already happening and makes that better, I can,
I will say the line of
I can
sight,
reconcile that in my mind at least.
even though like, yes, people drive 50, 60 faster sometimes on Marvin Road,
Yes, I do.
the line of sight right there, it's a very straight portion, so there's a lot of visibility, and that's what we're still would do the rapid flashing, the signage and stuff. I mean, obviously, anytime you're crossing a road from pedestrian safety, it's not ideal, but where that proposed crossing is probably the best spot it could be on Marvin Road.
Now Marvin Road is DOT, right?
Correct.
And does council have any aspirations of taking over that section of Marvin Road?
That,
So that
I
we
mean,
have more
yes, I
control
mean,
over
in the
something?
short end is yes, but
Yeah,
it-
aspirations, yes,
yes.
but any likelihood of actually pulling that off?
that would be one of the last ones if we were ever to take, because we would focus on neighborhood roads first and then have to work with DOT to get the thoroughfares. So, and I mean, we've requested for speed limit reduction and all that stuff. I mean, but at the end of the day,
What is the speed limit there theoretically?
I think it's posted 35.
Which road?
Is it Marvin Road?
Marvin Road's 45.
Actually,
Okay, it's
Oh,
45.
there's the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, just dropping it to 35 would at least get people's attention.
a little bit.
They would slow to
Or at least
50.
be enforced, no, but I think it's 45 right now because we have the speed limit sign.
Yeah, we have the speed limit and radar sign,
Radar sign.
and people like to come out of the roundabout and see how fast they can get up between the roundabout and that sign.
That's how we lost Meadowlark sign, probably.
Yes.
I don't know who ran over that.
Yeah.
Somebody
I
not
mean-
making the roundabout properly.
Just flat.
Flattened it.
It's back, well, okay, it's good.
I guess you're saying there's an open meeting on Thursday, right? And it just so I can understand the process, then is it gonna continue as far as feedback? I know we ask questions here, folks will come there. How do we, like, how does it continue to morph into the final plan?
What do you mean
Back to
final?
the plan, I guess.
So the loop itself, like the plan, I mean, once again, it's very basic because it's just a continuous loop around Joe Carr, Marvin School, and Newtown. The exact location is not necessarily identified in our master plan. The exact location is kind of up to when we get to this phase in preliminary engineering. The reason why, like I said, it dead ends is because we did receive grant funding for this. So like the goal is to finish that remaining portion, but at the same time, like it all comes down to funding. But with that being said, like after the public meeting Thursday, comments are allowed to be submitted to myself or to the village until Friday, December 6th. Did I get that right?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
I wanted to say 7th, but it's 6th.
7th is the tree lighting.
Correct. And council will then adopt the preliminary routing and we'll move into right-of-way and formal and engineering. Because routing is one thing, but like with this being a federally funded grant, there's a lot of other hoops we have to jump through regarding plan sets, and just outside agency approvals in general. I mean, dealing with the historic district, I mean, the actual Marvin Historic District, which is identified technically from roundabout to roundabout, Marvin Newtown Road to Marvin Newtown to Newtown and Waxhaw Marvin roundabouts. With the churches being identified as historical property, I mean, all that stuff. So we have to go through, I think it's NEPA, on top of just other type of analysis that we have to submit, because these are the other boxes we have to kind of jump through and check the boxes to check off for our funding. So, but if all goes well, We'd probably start construction of this portion between, I would say, spring of '26. Maybe this time next year, but it's going to come down to how many easements are going to be needed, how many utilities have to be relocated, all that stuff. So,
All right. Any other questions for Hunter on that?
Not on that one, but I guess can I ask a question on, maybe that's tabled still, the Marvin extension, is that?
The connector trail?
Connector trail, is that still?
I have, so I have a little bit on that.
That's not turned out, we can, is that for now or later?
Yeah, no, I have a little bit on that in just a minute, because that is actually what John was going to speak on, just because there was a little bit on it in the last council meeting in their work session. Do you guys have anything else on Trails Update? Okay, so then I'll move on. The part of John Barisic will be played by myself today. All I'm doing is recapping what was covered in the work session on October 30th, just to bring everybody up to speed if you don't get an opportunity to watch those videos of the sessions. So the things that are relevant to us is that the preliminary, and Tyler can, Hunter can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but the connector trails bridge design was originally a flat bridge, and the preliminary engineering study indicates that it will produce a rise in flood level. So we kind of have to go back to the drawing board on that one.
that's a yes and no answer.
Well, I was going to say, just based on what was in the meeting, the flat bridge was potentially a problem, but there were other options with regard to a box culvert or an arched bridge.
Correct. So the bridge per the design based off its placement and its construction design, would increase a rise. However, I think it was a 10 by 2, don't quote me on that, but a box culvert that would just basically span the
Channel,
channel,
yeah.
be dropped into the channel, does not.
Okay.
Which it's an interesting concept, but if you think about it, when we were talking with the engineers, you're channelizing that, where like a bridge, if the water were to rise, you're hitting something, where in this case, you're creating a channel to let it flow more efficient. So even in those,
When I was listening to the meeting, I was having a really hard time wrapping my head around the idea that a box culvert wouldn't create a rise and a flat-topped bridge would, but that's why I'm not an engineer, I guess. So.
Yep, we had the same conversation with the engineer, but once again, I think with talking with our consultants, they didn't even think about it until somebody at AMT on another team was like, hey, have you thought about this? Because we've only been asking for a bridge.
Right.
And they did that, and then in the model, it produced a no rise. So
I also understand that from, some of the environmental impacts, that like an open bottom culvert can be the answer to.
Yep. Because and ultimately, that's kind of where we're at, is we're still looking at an arch bridge.
Okay.
But then it's, to your point, the environmental impacts with the culvert, it is open, to my understanding, so it's like this. Literally,
Right,
this
so it's not
acts
the
as a
bottom culvert of
bridge.
some kind, but-
Doesn't make any sense, but that acts as a bridge, but yes. But we'd still have to make sure, but dealing with any type of environmental species and stuff, those open culverts at the bottom does allow for species to pass through and kind of keep that natural habitat, so most of the time are, preferred. So, like I said, we're going to keep working, or our consultant's going to kind of keep working and looking, and I'm sure we will probably have an update maybe at the council meeting next week. Not
Yeah, the
100%
bottom
sure.
line I got from the meeting was just that we encountered a rise, now we need to reassess, and then whatever the engineers say is the best option, we need to then get all the appropriate studies and the plans and so on and so forth. So I guess that's where we're at with that.
Correct, yeah, the box culvert, even though it didn't produce a rise, it comes down to cost. And it's
Apparently,
not-
the box culverts are cheaper, was what I kind of understood. But
Nah.
when we actually get numbers,
But
we'll.
it's still in addition
That's
to just a bridge.
I think the cost of the material is one thing. The issue with the box culvert is installation.
Getting it in there, exactly.
And that's
And then,
where
of course,
then
there's safety
equipment,
planning
all
and
that stuff, and that's where mobilization, all that stuff, and that's where your costs are gonna rise. So, once again, that's stuff that we're still working with the consultant, as well as looking at that, a more arch spanning bridge. And, hopefully, actually just Christina sent an email to them this morning, just kind of following up, but hopefully we'll either have that information at the council meeting for next week, or, I mean, definitely by the December meeting.
Okay. And then the other thing that was sort of related, well, was related to the Marvin Creek Connector Trail is Christina shared in her manager's report that, and I have the timestamp if you want to listen to it, that the Marvin Creek HOA Board has made a formal request to get the easement back. And so she submitted that to council for their discussion. The gist of it was that the board submitted a survey to the residents of the Marvin Creek HOA, and I don't know, something like 160 or so. Like I said, I'll give you the timestamp and you can listen to the numbers, but 160 or so residents out of 350 or so returned to the survey, and about 60-something% of them were in favor of returning the easement. So in response to that, the board made the formal request. However, council's response was to stand by their statement at the August 13th meeting, which was in favor of going forward. The basic underlying principles there, Councilmember Line spoke at length on it. So if you want to hear his words directly from him, but the basic of what he brought up was that, we received this easement in good faith, that at the time we received it, there was actually enthusiasm over the project, and that it sets a bad precedent to have people come along after the fact and ask for an easement back, and then if we were to give it back, it's not like I can go, this was not part of his statement, but when I was listening to what he was saying, it would be kind of like me going back to the water company and saying, hey, I'd actually like to put a horse paddock out back, so can I have that sewer easement back? So once we have it, it's, we received it in good faith was the principle, and that, would not set a good precedent to return it. The other point that he made was that, we have obviously expended a tremendous amount of time, particularly in staff time, in legal time, and then actual costs of engineering and so forth, pursuing this project. And before, in particular, Councilmember Line would even consider the request to return it, he would want to have a dollar amount attached to it. And so he has asked staff to come up with an estimate of what we have expended in terms of hours and contracts before he would even consider. So it sounded like, if he were to consider giving it back, at least for him personally, they would have to compensate for that return. So if you want to hear his comments directly from him, and I sensed from the video that there was pretty wide agreement among the rest of council, that's where that ended. But just so you all know that there was a formal request to take it back, and council at this point is not in favor of doing that. All right, so, and then the last thing from council that touched on stuff that's relevant to this board is the STRAP grant, which is the stream rehabilitation grant, is progressing. Nothing really noteworthy, just wanted to let you know that they mentioned that the engineering bids are being acquired, and those selections will be made, and once we have further information, I'll update you guys on that. The Marvin Creek HOA, given the controversy over this, may not grant us access to that portion of the stream, but it was discussed that. That would suck because we were just about to get to Keith. Oh no, we have to get through them. Yes. Do we need a motion for that? All right. I move that we recess for 5 minutes to give Austin a chance to reset the AV.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Super. Motion passes. Yeah, I got my update in right under there.
Thank you for that, yeah, so that's good to hear. So that council, that was the most recent working session, so.
Yeah.
Oh, I can deal with you now. You're on my list.
Testing, testing.
Testing.
I'm just waiting for the live stream to come back up. That should be within 30 seconds, hopefully. It looks like we're back. Okay.
All right, everyone.
Okay. You're good to reconvene. Apologies. I don't know why the AV equipment decided to restart.
No problem. Do we need a motion to reconvene?
You don't need a motion because you're not in session currently. So you could just call it back to order.
All right. Ooh, do I get to use the gavel?
You can.
All right. I'm gonna want to break it. All right, we are back in session. AV is back up. So just to complete the thought that I had when we cut out, is the stream rehabilitation grant. Like I said, they are in the process of getting engineering bids. Marvin Creek HOA, given the controversy over the connector trail, may not be really happy about giving access for any of the employment of those funds. Fortunately, our grant covers Marvin Branch Creek, which is a big thing, and we have other places we can work on.
So we'll just go there.
Yeah, we'll
Okay,
just go
so we're
wherever we're
gonna do
allowed.
it.
We're gonna do it. That just may determine the locations where we
And
focus our efforts.
I feel like after we do one, then everybody's gonna want one.
I was gonna say,
Yep.
because I know some folks who volunteer their space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They'll be like,
Right.
my creek's
Right,
next,
right,
yes.
Yeah, the part that's on my property, they can come and do for sure.
Me too, yeah.
The study.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we are going to try to pick up the pace here a little bit. So that is the Village Council recap. Like I said, if you want the time stamped and listen to those comments and numbers for yourself, let me know. So moving on, unfinished business, nothing on the agenda. New business, Austin, you have our PR&G board meeting schedule up
Yes.
on as an attachment.
Yes, so it is the same pattern as always, first Tuesday of each month, except for July. July is set for the second Tuesday, just to accommodate the week of the 4th. Take a look at those dates now, if you could. Let me know if there's any that needs to be changed. If not, would like someone to make a motion to adopt that schedule.
Did anybody get a chance? I mean, it is just first
It's just
Tuesday of the
like
month,
now.
just like it is now. It's just official housekeeping. All right, so. in
I'll
that
probably
case-
come here even if you don't have the meeting.
Right.
so.
She just likes it. Oh, no.
AV is going out again, it looks
Yep.
like. Go ahead and give me the motion if someone.
Yeah,
can.
okay. So I move that we accept the proposed, or that we adopt the 2025 PR&G board meeting schedule as submitted. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes.
Okay.
Board meeting schedule
We
adopted.
can go ahead and get Keith set up while we're waiting for the AV to come back.
Yes.
I think we might be maintaining audio through the recording. Not 100% sure.
Yeah, we don't know if it's just audio or
Yeah.
just
Don't act
video.
poorly.
Audio.
So let's go ahead and get Keith set up.
How do we want to do this if this is going to potentially fail? I didn't get to talk to the TV.
No, it needs to be, because it won't be recorded then. Just proceed for now.
Because I can't get it to change until the,
Hold on. This is one of the situations where I don't have a good answer, because I need it to be recorded, but, let's go ahead and get the TV.
Yeah, when he was doing poli-sci, I don't think he realized he was also going to be doing IT.
If you wonder why Clark's developed gray hair early, this is why.
I think the,
Yeah,
the
Alston and I
person that's willing to raise their hand to do the IT stuff, I do IT stuff all the
Yeah, the
time.
handy TV just
My
right there. I
former
mean,
IT,
you
and
have it
I
on hand.
just think that's the most hilarious thing in the world. He's like, you're the health dance, right? When you're 80, I
This
was
is
like,
also why we just want
I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm an entrepreneur and I can afford to pay people. So
Exactly, so
I
you
maintain my own websites and I've learned code, I've learned CSS from that and
but some people can't, won't, whatever. Maybe
maybe it's a block, maybe they
you
just
just can't.
can't,
That's not
cannot
the thing.
confront. Yes.
I mean, I have a really good friend who just, if you,
where's this?
I'm just gonna put it on a Word document.
That's perfect.
It might be out. No, it's coming back.
You want to try it?
No, now it's just the cameras.
Here, you're going to try to see if we pull it up.
Yeah, just try to pull up before that well the TV, and we'll switch to TV if it does it again. Okay, it looks like we're back. So we're gonna proceed. We're going to proceed as if we're not gonna have another issue, and if we do, we will switch to the TV.
Okay.
So hit DS right, yep. I'm gonna get the TV set up just in case. Anyone knows any good AV systems or AV vendors? You don't pay for it.
it's stress leaving your body.
All right, on the agenda, having approved the board meeting schedule for next year, we are moving on to Keith's presentation on land coverage analysis in Union County. Thank you for your patience, Keith. I'm sure you thought you were going to be presenting a little earlier.
You brought coffee.
Yeah.
Almost there.
Oh, our friendly sour.
I'm going to start calling you Clark Griswold. Because that looks like his light installation. All the cords.
Keith, I found
Yeah,
out,
that's pretty.
I
It
had a
is cool,
sourwood
yeah.
tree fall at the top of the road, but it has apparently made babies. I must have 8 or 9 of them up there. And they're picky little trees. They don't like to be just any old where.
Well, they like that
They
spot
like
then.
right there. I don't know why. That's because that's what it is. Pretty solid.
Hold on, Keith. Let me see if I can do this.
That's not me.
Okay, good.
This one's too tall.
I'm gonna steal a
you ever got it to work?
I said did once. I don't remember.
Yeah, see, that's.
Okay.
Urban forestry.
Okay.
Other side. Yeah, I don't know who is so tall that puts these chairs up to the max height.
All right. Just make sure the mic is picking me up. Okay.
Thanks, Keith.
So, I just want to let you know I got a family thing, so if my wife calls, I do have to answer. But I'm happy to be here. So, my name is Keith O'Haron. I'm the urban forester for Union County. I've been here about 3.5 years. I've been an urban forester for 16 years now. I've worked in small town in rural Indiana. I've worked for a wealthy Chicago suburb, and I've worked for the city of Austin, Texas. So I have quite a variety of experience, big cities, small cities, suburbs. And I'm originally from Wisconsin, and I have a bachelor's and a PhD in urban forestry, okay? And I'm here to talk to you about urban forestry here in Union County, and specifically here in the village of Marvin. So we, Union County, are in the Piedmont Atlantic region of the U.S., and it's what the Regional Planning Association calls the Char-Atlanta mega region, okay? So this is a metropolitan area that basically stretches from the middle of Alabama to the Research Triangle, okay? And this is 12% of the total U.S. population, and this whole area is urbanizing. And, you know, that's not saying that, like, Charlotte boundaries are going to connect up with Atlanta's boundaries, right? But it's saying that this whole corridor is urbanizing and growing. And we are in that. So, you know, here in Union County, adjacent to Charlotte, adjacent to Mecklenburg, you know, we're feeling, and we have been for almost 25 years now, really feeling the pressure of population growth. And that's even now extending into Lancaster and York counties in South Carolina. I have a coworker who just built a house in Lancaster, and he's, you know, commuting to Wingate, the other side of Monroe, and even that is still like 50-minute commute one way. So this region is expanding, okay, and the population pressure is going to continue. So this is from our urban planning office here in Union County. This shows that in the last 25 years, we've basically tripled, and we're set to, so right now we're at about 250,000 people, and we're on track to grow to about 400,000 by 2050. So that pressure is going to continue. So that's kind of the context of where we are. So I want to talk about trees, right? So this is a quote from the U.S. Forest Service chief, says that urban trees are the hardest working trees in America. And so that's significant because, you know, the Forest Service is traditionally a fiber extraction organization. You know, timber for lumber and pulp for paper has been their primary focus really since their inception. And so the idea that he's talking about urban trees being hardworking are, you know, that's significant. So, sorry. Yeah, sure. Sorry, there's just a whole other conversation in my left ear. And so when we think about urban trees, we think about, like, you know, so this is Queens Road, right? The big willow oaks downtown, Myers Park. But I guess I want to stress that here in Marvin and Union County, we are somewhat urban. We're definitely suburban, and we're becoming more urban. really the more impervious surfaces that we add, the more roads and homes and driveways and sidewalks we put down, the more we become urban. We might be primarily single family and kind of spread out, but we're definitely urbanizing and trending that direction. So these urban trees are important. There's so many benefits they provide. So in my profession, urban forestry, we've been spending the last 30 years trying to quantify in real dollar values the benefits of urban trees, and we've been really successful at that. The impetus was when we compete for municipal budgets and we're competing against engineers or police or fire or libraries, they're all able to quantify in real dollar values the benefit of like one more police officer on the street or one more fire truck. And so we've done a great job being able to quantify in real dollar values the benefits of urban trees, so that it's not just like, oh, well, trees look good and they make things look good, and it's kind of vague. It's much more hard science than it was even 10 years ago. And just in the last 10 years, we've really put a focus on human health, mental health, and physical health. And now when we start looking at that topic area, that's far more greater return on investment than even like stormwater or carbon sequestration. So we'll talk about some of these things. So just looking at stormwater, carbon sequestration, and air pollution, $1 invested gives back $2.25 in benefits realized to a municipality. And so, this is over 10, 20, 30 years. And as a local government, you should be thinking 10, 20, 30 years in the future, right? That's exactly your job, is to be long-range strategic planners for your community. And so that kind of return on investment should really catch your attention, because a lot of infrastructure that you install, the value of it immediately starts to depreciate when it's installed, but trees appreciate over time. So the longer a tree lives, the larger it grows, the more value it gives back. And again, so this is just those three items: stormwater, carbon, and air pollution. So this doesn't even touch like energy savings from shade. And so this is that $2.25 is a gross underestimate. Can you advance? This stopped working. Okay. So when we do talk about shade, we talk about the urban heat island effect, which is the concept that because you have a lot of mass, concrete and asphalt, and homes, driveways, and sidewalks, especially concrete and asphalt, it holds heat. It retains heat. You think of like a pizza stone retains heat. That's why you cook on a pizza stone, or a brick oven. It gets up to 800, 900 degrees. That's because that kind of mass retains heat. And so the more concrete and asphalt we put down, the more heat we retain. And instead of cooling off in the evening like we should or we normally would, we don't. And so this accumulates, and it creates an effect of, well, we never quite cool down, and we're always hotter than a surrounding rural area or a nearby city park. And so this has an effect on your energy costs in your home, but it also has an effect on air pollution, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But as we talk about impervious surface, asphalt and concrete that we're putting down, so it's not just that the surfaces absorb heat, but it's also that we are removing the capacity for storage of rainfall. So every time we build homes or a new road, we scrape off topsoil and we compact our clay subsoil to an engineering specification such that it is nearly concrete itself. And so that doesn't really absorb or hold rainwater the way that our natural or our native topsoil would. I I mean, so have we tried to dig a hole in your yard in a new construction home? You would know that you don't start digging a hole in Union County with a shovel, you start with a pick. Because it's been, that clay compacts to nearly concrete. And that's, you know, that's not even really like an exaggeration or hyperbole. It is almost near, technically it is almost, it's closer to concrete than it is the native topsoil that it started out as, okay? So yeah, the urban heat island effect, it has ramifications for smog and air pollution as well. So it exacerbates the problem of smog and air pollution. And so Charlotte's smog problem is kind of minor to moderate, but as we expand and put more cars on the road, we do have the potential to go from minor to moderate and stick there and have a moderate smog problem. We don't at the moment, but we're trending that direction, the more Charlotte sprawls out. In the urban heat island, again, it exacerbates the problem of air pollution. So this is a heat map, and so this is showing spots that are above average for the area. And so these are developments that are more recent, that are showing up. And so when we advance the slide here, we can compare where these hot spots are against our developments and where the lack of canopy is. And so, you know, one takeaway from this is just the importance of the trees that we do require developers to plant. They do have a lot of value because, you know, we probably are going to continue building homes, and we can manipulate the way that we build homes here in Union County or here in Marvin, how much land is set aside, the density of those things, but we're probably not going to stop altogether. That's probably not realistic. If you remember, we're on track to go from 250,000 residents in Union County to 400. So it's very important to say this aloud. I am not anti-development. My interest is not in stopping development. My interest is improving the outcomes and the quality of life for the residents that are in these homes, that are in these communities, okay? And just zooming in, you can see more closely, you know, so on the right there, that kind of a green belt in the back of those homes, it kind of shows up on the left as the void, the white space of between those two, they're not cul-de-sacs, but just those loop-shaped streets. And so once you really zoom in and start looking at these spaces, you see how important it is, even a little bit of trees being preserved, 10 or 20% of the land area makes a difference. It makes a difference between homes, it makes a difference along roads, because as we talk about air pollution, we'll get into that and the importance of screening along roadways. And so like I said, we've really, my profession, scientists in my profession, have really started honing in on the value, the return on investment of trees to human health and physical and mental health, okay? And so this is just one study, but so street tree planting data in Portland showed major differences in heart health, okay? And they controlled for, you know, gender and socioeconomic status and all those things, and they still found a really high return on investment, the value of street trees and having shade. And so I'll show more slides, but to cut to the bullet, number one, it's about improving walkability in neighborhoods so that even when it's hot outside, people still get outside and exercise on a shaded, safe sidewalk. And then number two, it's about the capture of air pollution and how vegetation, tree leaves, capture air pollutants, especially vehicle exhaust, so that's PM 2.5, particulate matter 2.5, how they capture that out of the air instead of that going into your lungs. So a very similar study in Northern California. Kaiser Permanente opened up kind of some anonymized data for 5 million clients and allowed a researcher to look at that. And he found that, wholesale cost of healthcare, Kaiser Permanente was saving $374 per year less in health costs on people who live in green neighborhoods versus people who don't. And that's wholesale cost. That's not to you or I, the consumer. That's them and like corporate profits. And so just imagine what that could be realized to you or I. And so, again, they controlled for age, sex, race, ethnicity, income, education level, population, and housing density. They controlled for all those things, and they still found that that amount of savings was being realized by Kaiser Permanente. And so, again, how does this work functionally? What's going on? And so both of these, it comes down to heart health and heart disease. And so, again, that's two things. It's preventing heart problems in the first place, and then encouraging healthy behaviors, walkability, shaded neighborhoods. And so, it's kind of a long story, but basically there's a link between vehicle exhaust, air pollution, and heart health, cardiovascular disease. And that's what this slide is about. This is if you want to explore that, the EPA has a long. And then all this is basically saying is, how does this work? Basically, a barrier of vegetation between you and car exhaust means that particulate matter gets captured on the surface of leaves and needles, coniferous leaves, needles, because they have so much surface area that they act like a filter. And then when it rains, that washes off and goes into the soil instead of going into your lungs. And so it's really a simple mechanism, just that leaves have so much surface area that they capture PM 2.5 out of the air instead of allowing it to go into your lungs. And so when I see something like that, and then I drive around the county, I'm like, why isn't there a row of evergreen screening between every playground in the street? That's just where my head goes, right? Like, if it's that simple, why aren't we implementing such a simple fix? And so that's just, human health. This study, this is a good one to read if you wanted to read one study on this topic, because Kathleen Wolf, she's been studying these topics for like 35 years. And she did a study of 200 other studies and summarized this topic. And she really does a great job of lining out all the benefits, all the human health and mental health, physical and mental health benefits. So switching gears a little bit, we talk about property values. So we talk about, we'll see a home in a neighborhood with mature trees and mature landscaping, and that appeals to us for reasons that go to our lizard brain and evolutionary reasons. We like to be able to see predators, or the ability to see predators coming, and we associate with, savanna landscapes, similar to when we came down out of trees. And that's a really long story, but it's also kind of like, vague and subjective. But an objective study found that, trees account for 10 to 11% of the sale price of your home, okay? So mature landscaping and trees mean a big difference in the property value of your home. And here's another study on the same topic. They had a wider range, but again, she's at 3% to up to 15%. So a wider range, but kind of encompassing that first range. Trees are a stimulus to economic development, and she digs into that quite a bit, Kathleen Wolf as well. And I talk about often, I'm not sure these slides are in here, but I have a couple versions of this, but I talk about Greenville, South Carolina quite often. In the 70s when they decided to do something with their downtown, the street that you see today, it was over 140 feet wide of concrete and asphalt because it was 4 lanes plus 2 lanes of parking plus a 12-foot wide sidewalk on each side. And so it was just wall-to-wall concrete and asphalt. And at that time, they said, well, we're going to do something different. And they ripped out over half of that concrete and asphalt and started planting trees. And now today, you see, it's a really long green strip of walkable space with, over 200 restaurants down there, and they're adding more all the time. It was in like Southern Living and, Condé Nast about like, the gem of the South. And a big part of that is that it's a nice place to spend time. And so this on the left is Greenville, South Carolina. And this place on the right is, different, right? Like, this is just somewhere on the right, this is a place you go to run an errand. The place on the left is somewhere that you go to spend time with your family, okay? And that's the difference. And so when we talk about, like, building a downtown for Marvin and talk about, the Heritage District, we need to be thinking about Greenville, South Carolina, okay? And not strip malls. I don't know that we do a lot of multi-family housing here in Marvin, but, this does apply across Union County. Just the idea that even, there's different, I'll say this, a little bit of vegetation goes a long way in even multifamily housing situations. And that's something we're really trying to implement in different communities across Union County. So what's the point? What is the point? Yeah.
Do you advocate different species or all the same? What I see is all the same.
Yeah, so, that's always tricky in an urban environment. We do strive for species diversity, but there are realities that we have to contend with. What will survive and what is available to purchase commercially in large quantities. Just because I can go to, Pikes and buy one of something doesn't mean I can go to a commercial nursery and buy 2 flatbed 18-wheelers of that same product. So, and because there's a housing boom, nursery stock is limited. What we tend to do is we waive tree size requirements. An ordinance might say, well, it has to be 10 feet tall when you plant it. And they'll say, well, I can only find stuff that's 6 or 8 feet tall. And I'll say, well, I'd rather get the right species than like the right size at time, because the tree will grow. So yeah, we have to be very flexible on, and it's, yeah. So yeah, we do strive for diversity.
Availability is one of the biggest problems.
It's a huge problem, yeah. And it's known across my industry, and it's like, there's a conversation about it occurring at the national level, like at conferences. It's a topic on, presentations, like how do we get nurseries to grow greater diversity of species. And it's hard because we're a little off topic, but basically the nursery industry it has all the risk of farming with the finicky nature of retail business. And so, nurserymen have to be risk adverse or they wouldn't survive. So it's hard to convince them to start growing something that they're not sure is going to sell. But that's a whole, I could do an hour on that. But so what is the point of all this? The point is trees are not just aesthetics and beautification, okay? Trees mean real money that we can quantify to you and your property tax base and to the property value of the homes in your community, okay? And so when you're thinking about, building a heritage district, building a downtown for Marvin, these things need to be in your head, right? It needs to be more than just like functional retail with accessible parking. It also needs to be a space where people want to spend time, not just swing through for an errand and swing out, right?
Not a strip mall.
And so, yeah, just circling back on this, we talked about, urban heat island effect and air pollution, heart health, walkability and obesity levels, stormwater, we will touch on a little bit more, property values, and even mental health and physical health. So how do we apply urban forestry, okay? Or what is it? So I think about urban forestry in three main buckets. The first one is development, and that's very relevant here in Union County. So all these communities have had development ordinances for like 25 years because development just kind of hit you like a wave crashing over a rock, and you kind of just had to react. And so even some of these tiny towns have had pretty strong forward-thinking development ordinances for like 2 decades, which is not really normal, but good on you for reacting positively to your situation. So digging into development, there's kind of 4 levels. The first is a public tree ordinance, which we've been working on getting from Marvin. This is usually basic and non-controversial because this just regulates trees on private property. And then the tree development ordinance usually comes later. But again, because of the development pressure on y'all, you kind of did the hard thing first, and now we're trying to catch up with the public tree ordinance. This is required to get Tree City USA award, which is a pretty low bar and something that we've identified that Marvin really has to have. It's a national recognition program. It's a pretty low bar, and we're going to get that. The next level that we see is a development ordinance, and that's pretty simple and non-controversial because it's just landscaping and buffering of parking lots, dumpsters, AC units, stuff like that. And this is kind of the gateway into trees in development is just like, well, can we just kind of dress it up a little? Like, okay, so that's this. Y'all are doing that. Good job. Level 3 is tree retention, which y'all are doing. This can be controversial because now is when we start to discuss retaining trees during construction. And so now we're negotiating with builders and developers about what is occurring within the building envelope of a lot. And now we might be influencing yield of lots, the number of lots, or the size of those lots, which, a little secret on size of lots, you can sell the same house on a small lot as a big lot and get like the same price for it. But, and therefore you can kind of increase density, but save more space. And so that's something that is kind of that's kind of where we are in development and tree preservation right now is like, well, how do we do some kind of a cluster development or conservation subdivision, which Weddington's been doing for 20, 25 years pretty successfully. And it's a compromise of sorts. And that's probably our best path forward, honestly, is something like that, clustering and.
Can you maybe describe what that means? I mean, you're saying that there's more clearance but more common space, or what does that mean?
Yeah, that's right. More common space. It's basically saying, well, 20 or 30% are the numbers I see most often of the building envelope needs to be set aside and not get cut and scraped and graded. And that becomes common open space. And you can have the same number of homes, but instead of on, the original lot, it's going to be reduced in size, the lots, but you get the same number of homes. And so some builders actually like it because that means they can build less linear feet of roads, put less linear feet of water and sewer line in the ground, and so it's kind of a savings of sort. It can be. But again, if you're building the same house on a 20,000 square foot lot as a 30, you're gonna sell that house for the same price. You're not really gonna get appraised less terribly much for the difference between those two lot sizes. So it's kind of the best compromise that we've seen in North Carolina.
Follow-up question on that.
Sure.
Do you have a preference from the professional standpoint of whether, you were saying that less linear feet of roads, and so that's a benefit to the builder. That's talking about taking that 20 or 30% and setting that aside as a consistent greenway, as opposed to, for example, like Belle Grove, where they just didn't clear cut the individual lots. From an urban forestry standpoint, would you prefer to see the canopy spread out amongst the housing? Or is it a wash with regard to concentrating all the housing in the center and having a green belt around it?
I think that we prefer to prevent habitat fragmentation. So if we can leave land in the biggest contiguous chunk
Okay.
possible, that's ideal.
Okay.
Additionally, if we can locate that adjacent to an existing chunk, like a stream buffer, a floodplain, now you're kind of adding on, you're stacking, and you're keeping the biggest contiguous chunk possible. That's kind of the best result. One
So
thing.
that works out better for the developers and for the environment.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Because it keeps them further uphill, further from the floodplain.
Cool, okay.
And to add, Keita, because we've talked about this through a couple different developments. The other thing is too is in certain scenarios trying to preserve on individual lots. I mean, those lots are sometimes already being graded, and so the protection during the development is one thing that we have to rely heavily on with the developer. But you're also still scraping away that topsoil in most instances, so you're hurting the environment that tree's already that it's been living in, and so.
The chances are you're going to lose those trees anyway.
And yeah, I mean, it happened. It happened in Belle Grove. There's a few that happened in the preserve where, I mean, you're seeing it now that after a couple years after the development's been closed out, that something happened during the development that either damaged the tree to make it where it's dying or dead already. And so, that's something that we've talked about and trying to find that mix, because trying to keep that continuous strip is one thing, and then we do have mitigation on top of that where they're going to be planting back species on the new graded portion. So it's trying to find that right mix.
No, that's just an important distinction is if people come forward with development plans and we're looking at what we do with the 20, 30%, that is important information for us to make a recommendation of, yeah, let's chunk it all together as opposed to trying to distribute it, so.
Yeah, and that's like with the heritage at Marvin, for an example, because I know like people have their opinions, but that's one it's 100-foot continuous strip. And one, all that's being preserved on top of, then they do have common open space area within the development that they'll be planting trees, because yes, smaller lots and certain however, you're maintaining that original 100-foot strip that does then abut Meadowlark that is pretty dense with tree plantings. And so that's kind of one of the first subdivision of Marvin that's more like that. Mm-hmm. Typical conservation subdivisions always had a 25-foot preservation strip. Wider in certain areas, preserves a prime example. However, in theory, depending on the age of certain neighborhoods in Marvin, yes, then you would have a 50-foot kind of continuous, because you have 25 in one neighborhood, 25 in another. So it's just, it sometimes worked out like that, sometimes didn't. But the biggest thing is that, in our old ordinance too, we had that view shed buffer, which going back to, I think it was like slide 16, with having it like to block the road for one, sound, noise, other, but also the environmental impact of that. That's why you see a lot of these neighborhoods that have a big buffer up front, but then it's only a 25-foot kind of on the side and exterior. So that's what we've been playing with, and Keith reviewed the new Article 11 in the MDO and got some very good feedback from him that got incorporated in. And so there's still changes we're continuously making to our ordinances, as well as just other methods in general that we're trying to make sure that we're protecting, maintaining, and enhancing over time.
So my apologies, didn't mean to derail your presentation, but
No,
That's
it's good conversation.
yeah. it was-
And I'll say that, these are preferences, but every subdivision proposed has unique challenges.
Sure.
you know, some of them, the floodplain is in the back away from the road, and it's easy to say, well, yeah, put the 20 or 30% back there, buffer up the floodplain, and that's a no-brainer. But sometimes it's up front, and it's like, well, okay, that might be more challenging. So there's, it's
No, it's
not.
just helpful for us to have an idea
Sure.
of what the ideal target is.
Yeah, I would say that in general, it is preferential to keep it in a big chunk.
Okay.
A contiguous strip, adding a buffer to an existing floodplain, or some kind of a big chunk.
Excellent.
So then, kind of the top level of tree ordinances is kind of the level 4, which is really regulating trees day to day. Basically, if you're not regulating trees day to day, sometimes you'll see people cut down a tree on a Tuesday and put in permits on a Wednesday, okay? And so this is not right for every community. You know, the wealthy suburb city in Chicago that I worked for last, you know, they had been built out for 60 years. I mean, they hadn't had a real subdivision in 60 years. They were built out, surrounded on all sides, and it was like a city in a forest. I mean, they had mature oaks everywhere, and they wanted to keep it that way. But single homes were being torn down and replaced with a bigger, modern footprint. And so there was a lot of tree removal occurring anyway. But because it was small and tight and close quarters, this kind of day-to-day regulation worked. And so we've started to get into this. I mean, this is part of your ordinance, is day-to-day regulation.
Yeah, and I mean, Keith, through my 3 years being here, tree removal was something that when I first came here was interesting because it wasn't from the municipalities I worked for prior. I mean, you would see lots or like literally large tracts of land be clear cutted just for the sale of the timber. However, you know, the challenge that we deal with is not having, I mean, now having Paul and me on staff, but only having a limited amount of staff is to, I mean, really kind of go out and check on some of these things, because you'd be surprised. I mean, a lot of our residents do a good job at contacting me even for a dead tree, which our ordinance basically says you don't have to get a tree removal permit. I always recommend that they do, just so it's documented, because some HOAs, I always then have them provide me the documentation that it's dead. But at least we have it on file. But you'd be still surprised that you would have pool companies that are like the worst about this, that, to Keith's point, will cut the trees down first, then pull permits the next day, and then say no trees are being removed. So it's one of those things like, you know, and I always, on every single zoning permit, do a GIS printout included with the permit. And so if they're proposing a pool and it's showing that backyard is fully wooded and they're not removing trees, I ask questions. But, you know, that's the biggest way, though, is having those most trees are being removed for some type of development, which that means a zoning permit is needed. And so that zoning permit is the way I kind of can make sure they're getting a tree removal permit and mitigation's being followed. Because once again, you have some residents that will try to go by the books and do a tree removal permit first, but then not really like, hey, we want to do a pool maybe 6 months to a year from now, but we want to go ahead and remove trees. And it's like, why? And so that's stuff Keith and I have been working on and trying to, you know, really define that procedure and process, and making sure that at the end of the day, we're not just having trees removed at will or without documentation.
So really, y'all are currently functioning at this level, at this top tier. So again, talking about impervious cover and stormwater, you know, in 2018, Florence really hit us. And this was a big issue. We had over 100 roads closed in those first 24 hours. And, you know, this isn't just me at this point. The state fire marshal has started to take note of these kinds of road closures. And our county fire marshal has said that when he's looking at new subdivisions, they're starting to consider, well, maybe there should be two entrances to every subdivision because during a hurricane, one of them might be underwater. And they're expecting a backup. And so this kind of speaks to how much impervious we're putting down. And so when we talk about green infrastructure is kind of a big word, but it basically just means combining landscaping with stormwater utilities into one system. So traditionally, we would design things on the right, which is what we call the gray. It's designed to kind of curb and gutter the stormwater, put it into a pipe, get it off site. Maybe put it in a wet pond first. When that overflows, it goes into the creek, downstream to your neighbor. Green infrastructure is in part about keeping some of that on site and putting it into the soil, into the earth. And so trying to prevent how much scraping and grading occurs works with that. This is an example of a parking lot. So on the right would be a parking lot where the median has been dug out of the compacted clay and replaced with something that drains. There's usually going to be an underpipe, under drain as well to move water out of there. But first it gets filtered, and it allows stormwater to leave your site more slowly instead of everything being real flashy, what we call flash flooding, flashy. And everything that's concrete and asphalt is very flashy. It just is designed literally to just get it off site as quickly as possible. And these things...
It also filters.
Yeah, it also filters pollutants out, yes, yeah. So, I mean, you know, functionally, these things can be beautiful, whether it's the median of a highway, or on the left here, this is a residential neighborhood with curb cuts where the stormwater can exit into the planting strip before going into a pipe. It just reduces the amount of water that is getting off site. It's putting that water to better purpose. And even ponds themselves can be put to a higher purpose. You know, the pond on the left is pretty common here in Union County. It's being mowed and weed whacked down to the edge of the water. This is a paradise for geese and really nothing more. I mean, this is kind of a tepid cesspool on the left. That Canada geese love for whatever reason, to eat the green shoots. On the right is the same kind of a pond. Functionally, it's a stormwater BMP, but it's also functioning as landscaping. It's also and adding beauty to the community. It's also functioning as again, kind of a green infrastructure, basically a stormwater filter, keeping stormwater on site and filtering that. So the second bucket of urban forestry I mentioned already is the public tree ordinance, and we're working on that. Again, that shouldn't be terribly controversial. What it does is it talks about how the town, the village, will care for trees on its own public property. And this is important because it shows you, kind of living by your own rules, okay? Taking good care of trees on public property because you're engaging in all these things on the left in development and telling people what to do with their private property. So it's very important to do that. It's also important for that recognition. And this also involves taking ownership of street trees. And so as you take over residential streets, that means you're taking that right away. And ideally, you would also take over ownership of street trees and start a program of preventative maintenance and having those pruned every 5 years. Some municipalities elect to push that responsibility off to the adjacent homeowner. I do not recommend that. I recommend taking ownership of street trees.
And that's to what Keith just said, is that's kind of where we've been proactive over the last 20 years with that. If you look back at our old ordinance, we defined street trees as they weren't street trees. Marvin Creek's kind of a prime example. You have two nice canopy trees in the front yard, but they're in the front yard of the individual property. They're not they're not in a planting strip, all that. So some of our newer neighborhoods, they're at the back of sidewalk, which once again, we never really technically had street trees like actually in like the planting strip or something. Estates at Marvin Branch does. That's one that Keith and I were out there last week, and so it's kind of finding that way with newer subdivisions that's about to close out and kind of working through that, as well as what do we do about potential older subdivisions where we maybe have a maintenance agreement that puts that responsibility on the HOA or the individual property owner. That, you know, and that, once again, those are trees that are in the right of way, maybe not on private property, because if they're on private property, they're the responsibility of the property owner.
Yeah, they're
So,
private.
Yeah, so.
I mean, that's that, but
And-
if they're on public property, if they're in the right-of-way as you take over these streets, you should take over ownership of trees as well, responsibility for trees.
And the other thing we're doing, and this is what I was going to talk to you about after this, is with our greenways. Some that we're trying to start implementing is like, most subdivisions have a 30-foot greenway easement on their plat that's dedicated to the village, but either having that also as a public planting easement or even doing a 50-foot on top of that 30-foot for public planting where we can, and it's the village's easement where when we do some of these greenway projects, we could potentially look at planting some screening or some additional trees, but then once again, that would be a public easement that we would, you know, be responsible for and could utilize to help achieve some of the public tree standards for Tree City USA. But that's some that we're currently having in the works, and hopefully we'll have a ordinance or policy in the next couple months for that. Yeah, well, that's kind of the intent, but even looking at doing, like I said, a public planting easement and kind of having some guidelines for that, where we can potentially partner with some HOAs or something like that to maybe enhance some of their view shed or some of their buffers and stuff like that over time.
Can I also just make sure I understand, when you call it street tree, if it's not in a public property, or I guess what, is it like a certain distance from the street, considered a street tree versus a?
Yeah, so both I mean, street tree, that terminology comes from like, you know, cities in the Midwest and the Northeast, like Chicago and so forth, where you have a curb, a planting strip, and a sidewalk. And that planting strip is quite obviously public property, and it's loaded with trees in, you know, all these cities. For whatever reason, as we've developed here in North Carolina over the last 20, 30 years, a lot of times we've avoided that. A lot of that is NCDOT not wanting to take on responsibility for trees, so they exclude them from the right-of-way and they get pushed into the front yard. And so an ordinance might say there's a requirement that you plant a street tree, but then functionally, when it comes time to install trees, or even on the drawing, on the plans up front, they get drawn behind the sidewalk in the front yard. They still act as the nearest proxy to a street tree because at least they're still throwing shade on the sidewalk. They're not really throwing shade on the street terribly, but if there is a sidewalk, they'll be shading the sidewalk, and so they are functioning as the nearest thing we have here to street trees. So that's where that terminology comes from.
So, but what you're saying then is the typical ownership would be done by the town and the village for those trees? Or you're saying, or if it's in the homeowner's front, I guess.
If they're in the planting strip, we should take them over. If they're behind the sidewalk, we probably will not. Those are almost certainly on private property. I mean, because generally the right-of-way ends 6 to 12 inches behind the sidewalk, and the tree's going to be behind that. And so it's going to be a private front yard, and I'm not suggesting you get involved with that.
You sort of mentioned this, and maybe you're going to talk about it in a bit, but where you locate a tree has a larger or less effect on the heat island of it all, right? And so having a tree really close to the road is actually better for reducing the temperature, but it's not what we're used to seeing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's if you drive around Charlotte downtown, or not even downtown, but older parts of town, you see it a lot.
Right there.
Yeah, they're right there between the curb and the sidewalk, and I feel strongly that's where street trees belong. But, you know, again, for a variety of reasons, in new construction, really anything built in the last 20 to 30 years in North Carolina, there's a good chance that your street trees are behind the sidewalk. if there's a sidewalk at all.
But you're an advocate for them being
Yeah,
street trees?
yes, and for the reason that
Literally on the
you,
street.
for the reason that you identified, to mitigate the urban heat island effect as much as possible, and also to improve shade on the sidewalk. They tend to do, because if you're planting trees in both the front yard and the planting strip, you're bracketing the sidewalk on both sides with shade trees. And then additionally, street trees along the street, the closer they are to the street, the greater traffic calming effect they have. So there's a lot of studies and science behind this, but basically it narrows your vision and it makes you slow down, okay? And so I see this in Callanwood, which half of Callanwood is in Stallings and half is in Indian Trail, okay? And when Callanwood was built, Stallings required street trees, and so, and then Indian Trail did not. And so, in the Stallings side, you know, it's tighter, the trees are right there behind the curb, and it has a feel like you're in a mature landscape, almost like a city, but in a really nice way. When you're on the Indian Trail side, it feels different. It feels, the streets, you can see, you know, hundreds of yards down there, and so it feels like a raceway, and cars drive faster, and there's no sidewalk, and so cars drive faster on that side, and it's just, some of it is preference. If that's your preference and that's where you want to live, then that's fine. There's plenty of those products available for you here in Union County. There's a lot of different HOAs, a lot of different takes on subdivisions here, but I would stress street trees between the curb and the sidewalk.
Okay.
All right, and then, so finally, the third part of, we're winding down here, the third bucket of urban forestry really is reforestation, okay? So most of what was built over the last 25 years was not planted up the way that I would recommend, and/or it was planted with Bradford pears and crepe myrtles, okay? So this is one thing we're doing is, so just in the last really 10 months, we've gotten together a group of volunteers and we formed Trees Union. So this is a nonprofit here in Union County dedicated to reforesting Union County, to planting trees in Union County, okay? So just in 10 months, we've gotten a board. Christina's on the board. We've gotten bylaws, we got official 501c3, we got donations, and on Saturday, we just had a planting, our first ever volunteer tree planting event at Stallings Elementary. We put 24 trees on that playground. And so kind of our initial focus is, at the moment, is on schools and playgrounds, but we do want to expand to HOAs that were built over the last 25 years and lack canopy. And we do have data so that, I mean, I have a list by municipality which HOA has how much tree canopy coverage. And so there's a built-in prioritization scheme right there. I mean, some of these might be 15 years old and they've kind of recovered from development and they got planted pretty well and the canopy has kind of started to rebound. Some of them never rebounded. I mean, some of them got scraped and graded and they didn't really get planted and they have the same canopy now they did 15 years ago. So we kind of know where to target those kinds of replanting efforts. And so this is modeled after Trees Charlotte. If you're familiar with that nonprofit, they've been around about 13 years. They plant like 16 to 20,000 trees a year they give away or plant in Charlotte. And they say they should be doing 50 a year, 50,000 trees a year. So they're trying to grow and that's what they need to put out to just maintain the canopy in Charlotte. And we have more development really occurring here than we do in Charlotte. And so we need to be replanting trees pretty aggressively. And so we have a great board and we plan on raising a lot of money as quickly as possible to put a lot of trees out in Union County.
And you can find out more on the website.
Yeah, the website's up,
Trees
and,
Union.
yeah.
When you talk about the diversified, I mean, because I think you said Craig Myrtle, what was the other one you said, but I mean, now I think a lot of folks are planting screening trees, right, and then ornamental trees, right? Does everything, I mean, how do you categorize that, or I guess as far as most beneficial, right? Because if you think of a homeowner, what their objective might be is, something that's green or beautiful.
Yeah.
May not be what's
And that's okay. I mean, a new homeowner, yeah, the first thing they do is they run out and buy the green fence, right? A row or 2 rows of evergreen screening. And those have value, certainly, especially wildlife value, as well as the air pollution mitigation that we mentioned of capturing air pollution. I would also urge those homeowners to grab 1 or 2 canopy trees and plant some canopy trees as well. But yeah, those evergreen screening trees, they do have value. They absolutely do. I just steer you away from Leland cypress, okay? There's
Yeah, they have a
better
short
options.
lifespan, right?
Yeah.
And then
Really,
they all die at the same time.
really quickly, we do have a hard cutoff at 11, and we still have 1 agenda item, so I just want to make you all aware of that.
Okay.
So if we
Yeah,
don't
this is
get
my
to it, we
last
have to table
slide.
it.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Just one quick question.
Yeah.
Are there recommendations on that site of the canopy trees for the, for this area?
I have some recommendations on my website at Union County Extension.
Okay.
So Union County Extension's website, I have like more than a dozen FAQs. And so that's a good resource, or people can contact me. A big part of my job is advice to HOAs and homeowners.
We could maybe link to that on
Yeah.
Trees Union.
Yeah.
Just an idea.
Yep.
Could do that this afternoon. Well, because I know we got a hard
Any
stop.
la-
but
yeah, any
I
last-
do have a couple of questions, and maybe this is for later. But back to what Christina was talking about, what people plant, they tend to put, the tree in the front yard, one little dinky, sad-looking tree, and the backyard is nothing, right? And so I know this was a Bob Nunnenkamp thing and it still is. Trees in the backyard, why, we need to promote not just the screening trees, but to what you just said, that you put a couple of canopy trees in the back, and then backyards butt up against each other, and you start making your own little screen back there, your own little tiny forest kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I don't think we promote that. I don't mean
Not
we,
yet.
I mean anybody.
Well, yeah, I think that Trees Charlotte does, I
Okay.
mean, they're giving away trees to homeowners who lack canopy, and they're encouraged to put them in front yards, backyards, wherever they're gonna provide that homeowner with the most benefit.
Yeah.
Because that's the tree that's gonna be there the longest, so you're getting the most bang for the buck. Because again, the longer a tree is on site, the greater the return on that investment. So, yeah.
Anywhere's better than nowhere, I get that, but the
Yeah.
idea of kind of making
Well,
your own
we can
little
work on-
habitat back there.
We can work on promoting that, I mean, within our
point.
stuff, as we make recommendations and stuff like that.
Yes, we can.
Did you have any other questions?
Yeah, I do, but that's okay.
So given our short time, thank you, Keith.
thank you.
You answered a lot of really great questions, and that is going to be super helpful information, given that. The next agenda item was going to be talking about we're going to begin a revision process of the Greenways Master Plan. However, given our short time today, what I'm going to do is just sort of touch on it. We were originally going to try to generate some questions that might be included on the survey, the community survey that council's been working on. However, at the last council meeting, they decided to push off that survey until the spring because they wanted to get our input
How nice.
and the questions. So we do not have any sort of super impending timeframe for generating those questions. So what I'm instead going to ask you guys to do, given our short time today, and we'll pick this up in more detail at the next meeting, is to definitely read the first chapter that was attached to the agenda today, and also to incorporate all of the amazing information that Keith just laid down on us with regard to how, if you have a copy of the master plan, flip through it. If you need one, it's online. And put that information that you just absorbed into a quick look at the master plan. And the things that I would tell you that we'll pick up more in depth next time is that the purpose of the master plan in that first chapter is laid out, but think about how you might want to add to, or probably not subtract from, but add to those concepts, which are, you know, what is the purpose of the master plan, and really do think about it in long term. What seems ludicrous to provide for today, like a sidewalk in a place that's really rural, might, if it becomes developed like the Heritage District or something, might be really relevant later. So try not to look at it as a right now thing, but as a 30 or 40-year development thing. And also to contemplate the fact that these master plans, not only do they give us a map for the future, so they're not necessarily plans that get done as individual projects, right? Like we're talking about the Marvin Creek Connector Trail as an individual project, but sometimes it's when a developer comes to us and we can say, oh, hey, looking at the master plan, we wanted to have a sidewalk there, or we wanted to have a trail there, then that tells us, hey, you need to put that in, even if nothing right now connects to it. So that's one of the things, and it also puts homeowners on notice when there are property transactions. It puts the buyer on notice that this is something we're contemplating in the future. So you're less likely to have somebody say, well, I didn't know you were planning on putting something in there, and then getting a lot of objection. You can say, hey, it's been on our plan for ages. It was public knowledge. And so those are some of the purposes of it. So like I said, I'll encourage everyone to take a look at the master plan. Keep those concepts in mind about future, notice, community, environment, health, all the things that Keith just brought up today. And, you know, make some notes to bring to the board, and we'll start revisiting anything that you might think needs changing, or just emphasizing what's already there.
Just one thing I'd add
Yeah,
to that
John.
too. One topic, for example, we looked at a master plan that we had kind of 2 times ago before we did
The
the latest
2008
one.
one, yeah.
And one of the things we noticed is that in the latest one, we didn't have any of the specific trail standards.
Yes.
You know, so it's something that we had before in some of our documents, you know, other plans and things like that. But for whatever reason, it didn't make it in the last one. So that was one of the things that we kind of saw that, you know, we said, well, yeah, you know, does it make sense to kind of just update one little piece of it, or look at the whole thing? And we were just thinking, you know, with where we're at as a village at this point, you know, as things have continued to change, that, you know, it really makes sense to kind of take a look back at the whole thing. And that was just one example of it, you know, where we want to have some more kind of defined things, so that when a developer looks at that master plan, they kind of have a better idea of what would be required if they want to put in an asphalt trail or a concrete trail or a natural trail, and if we have better definitions around those. And some of that's because, you know, our standard for what our natural trail has been has kind of changed over the years, just out of our experience, what holds better, what stands up better, all of those type things. So.
And then the materials that develop. So yeah, we'll start with a top-level overview, and then in subsequent meetings, we'll drill down, because one of the things we'll contemplate is what is the purpose of, like when we talk about trails specifically, as opposed to just greenways in general, because we can have greenways that don't do anything but exist. And then we can also talk about where it makes sense to put uses inside those greenways. And what uses do we want? Do we want them for biking? Do we want them for just walking? Do we want them to have exercise or, you know, other interactive type facilities? So on and so forth. And so as we get down to those more specific uses later, then we'll talk about, you know, the substrates and talk about putting in specific guidance for us as a board, and for everyone, you know, as we have changes on the board, and then for the purposes of the developers. All right. So moving on to a review of action items. I don't think we have any action items from this meeting.
No formal action items. Some of you, I did give you an emergency contact form. I need you to fill that out before you leave the building. Otherwise, I'm forced to follow you to your car.
Okay, so yes, please fill out Austin's emergency contact form, and the other action item is just for the board in general to contemplate to look at the master plan existing and contemplate what changes or emphasis that you would like to see going forward. And some of that will be developed into questions that we'll put to the community on the survey, but that has been pushed off until spring. All right, so ongoing action item list, we completed one of them, which was Keith's presentation. So yay us. The only other one is light pollution stuff from you. And we'll
I
continue.
think about it all the time.
Yes.
I'm just gonna tell you, I think about it every day.
She gave me a newsletter article, so that was something.
Yeah, I did. That's not enough. It's just not enough.
But that is progress. So you want us to leave that on there?
Yes.
Okay, we'll leave that on there.
I will get it done one day. Y'all will all be surprised.
All right, and with 7 minutes remaining, do we have any additional board member comments? I mean, there was some great discussions today, but anything else that wasn't covered? Oh, there was one thing that I didn't mention because of the AV stuff. It was in the council meeting. The Village Hall Park adjacent to this building, the Part F grant that we have for that, a new revised vision for that was submitted, just FYI, to council at the last work session. I have a copy of that adjustment, and I just want to mention that it dovetails nicely with Keith's presentation because one of the reasons that it needed to be revised was to preserve a couple of very large heritage oaks that are over in that, hiding in that mess of foliage over there. And so the event lawn may no longer really function as, say, for example, pop-up markets, because one of the things we're doing in order to preserve those trees is doing minimal grading, because we have such a large root zone to protect. So the trees have now become an integral part of it.
Good.
Means that we'll have a little bit more slope, which will work perfectly if we do an amphitheater or event stage kind of thing. But the idea now is mostly just to have a passive event lawn. Some areas of it further away from the trees could be graded more flat, and that could serve as a pop-up, like you were talking about the markets. As a potential pop-up market was one of the things, or a farmer's market type thing, was one use that we contemplated for that park. So now that will be a little bit more curtailed in favor of preserving the trees.
Yay.
So, like I said, if you want to see a map of that redesign, let me know. I have one with me. Other than that, once again, any other comments? I kind of steamrolled with
I'm
that.
sorry, just real briefly, because I
Yeah,
know
go ahead.
last meeting, when I mentioned about the running groups and engaging
Yes.
with Let Me Run and Girls in the Run. And so I haven't made huge contacts, but we do have one person, Tyler, and I'm going to try and connect her, Amy Rosado, who's in the community, about maybe forming a Let Me Run program within the town of Marvin or village of Marvin. So
Oh,
there's
beautiful.
something, they want to leverage the park. So I'm going to, Tyler, if it's okay, you and I can continue to work offline because they have the program in the fall and in the spring. So maybe we can target the springtime teams as they form, how to get them more involved with our parks.
Oh,
That's a great,
that's
that's
awesome.
great.
And then I have not heard back from the cross-country coach, but I will, and maybe folks are aware, the Marvin Ridge High School team won the state championship last weekend. So
Oh,
that's
awesome.
pretty cool, and they use our
stuff.
Our stuff. So anyway, maybe there's something we could tie in and shout out to them.
That
since
would be
they
fantastic.
Are users, I think, Tyler, you said they come and run right here and practice, and now they're state champions.
Did you get a chance to reach out to Pulmi's contacts?
I have not. That is
Okay.
one more. I thank you for getting that too. So I'm.
But yeah, we definitely want that. That's exactly the kind of feedback that we need as we drill down into what are the uses that the community wants, and then also for survey
Thank you for
questions.
getting that.
So, government moves slowly, but we do move. All right, and speaking of slow movement, so did you,
Just one thing,
Yeah.
it was probably spoken about, but just wanted to the staff and everybody that volunteered and stuff, the trick or treat event at the park was just a lot of people, and it was really handled well, the activities that you had and the sponsors that showed up and gave out a lot of candy. I was there pretty much the whole time, and it seemed to be a great time had by all, and the staff, especially with the parking, did a great job. It was overwhelming, but we weren't overwhelmed.
that's a good way to phrase it, yeah. No, I'm glad we had another successful event. All right, anyone else? No, we're all good? All right, in that case, I move to adjourn this Parks, Rec, and Greenway Board meeting on Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, everybody go vote if you haven't already.